Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
You are listening to the TrekRanks podcast, a member of the Tricorder Transmissions Podcast Network. This is episode 60, featuring the top 5 scenes on location. Welcome, Star Trek fans. I am Jim Moorhouse, and I am the host of the TrekRanks podcast. And tonight we are continuing our Scenes in Trek series with another awesome topic that you can only really find here on TrekRanks. And we do a lot of themed episodes on TrekRanks, but my favorite one, I always say whenever we do this, is our Scenes in Trek series. And yeah, it's just a fun way to talk about Trek. And it started as a joke. Some friend of mine at work said, you should do a topic like top 5 scenes in a Jeffries tube. And I was like, that's pretty funny. Wait a second. That's actually a really good idea. And so ever since then, we've been doing them. We've got Turbo Lift, Shuttlecraft, Jeffries tube. We've done Scenes in a Brig, and now we're doing Scenes on Location. This is our 5th one. And for this topic tonight, it's one we've been planning for a while because I've been wanting to have the great John Tenuto back on the show, and he's with us tonight. John was previously on episode 17, which was our top 5 pop culture references. And if you don't know John's work, he's pretty much a legendary Star Trek fan and historian, and he's been featured in a bunch of places. You might have seen him at a convention, and most recently on the awesome Netflix series Toys That Made Us, where they featured his collection and his expertise on collectibles. Teacher, writer, all-around great guy, true scholar and a gentleman. This introduction is going on way too long. John, welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thanks so much, Jim. I got to get you that check. Thanks for reading what I wrote there. No, I'm kidding. That's a really nice introduction. Thank you.
Well, it is nice to get you back. Oh, by the way, Alex Perry's here too. Hey, Alex.
Hi, everyone.
I was just kidding. Alex has been on TrekRanks quite a few times. The host of Weekly Trek here at the Tricorder Transmissions. In fact, Alex, you've done a couple of the scenes in Trek, right?
I did the inaugural scenes with Scenes in a Turbo Lift.
Okay, there it is. All right, so that was the only one? Can't remember. You've been on
that's right.
9 or 10 of these shows. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is my 9th TrekRanks.
Well, now we got Tenuto and Perry on for a great topic. So let's get into our TrekRanks recalibration.
What are you recalibrating?
Everything. It's a sweeping, a recalibration of all systems.
As regular listeners will know, general order number 1 here at TrekRanks is that we love Trek. And we love to rank Trek via some deep dive topics just to get the conversation started.
Infinite diversity.
In infinite combinations.
And as the Vulcan Master and young angry Tuvok just said, our show is about all the reasons we love Star Trek. It's infinite diversity and infinite combinations. We're not here to nitpick or to argue, but just to celebrate the greatness of Trek. We love it all, from TOS to TNG, straight through to Enterprise and the Kelvin timeline, and now Discovery as well. It's all fair game here on the TrekRanks podcast.
Black alert. Black alert.
And a quick reminder that Discovery spoilers are definitely in play. So tonight's episode is current through season 1 and 2 of Discovery. And one more reminder that we use the term episodes as a quick and easy shorthand, but the 13 films are always in play as well.
Open hailing frequencies. Hailing frequencies open. On viewer.
And you can find TrekRanks on the interface links at TrekRanks.com. And you can contact me directly on Twitter at TrekRanks and at Enterprise Extra. And you can also call and leave us a message with your own picks at 609-512-LLAP. That's 609-512-5527. John, how can guys get a hold of you if they want to track you down and talk a little Trek?
Oh, it'd be great. They can get me on Facebook just as John Tenuto, and they'll find a little icon is a Fansets pin version of Captain Kirk if to find out which John Tenuto it is. And then on Twitter, we're just Tenuto family. So my wife and I share that Twitter account, and that same thing. They'll see the same little icon. It's
a great follow for Trek history and lots of Trek Trek collectibles and whatnot. Alex, how about you, man?
2 places you can find me online. First is my personal Twitter account. That's at Alexander T. Perry. And second is my show on the Tricorder Transmissions Network, Weekly Trek, which is a 30-minute news show. And you can find that at Weekly Trek.
A 30-minute news show that cuts through all the garbage. So it's real news, and we love it. Great job, man.
No Dominion propaganda.
Exactly. Okay, I think we're ready to jump into our level 1 diagnostic.
Diagnostic cycle will be complete in 20 seconds.
So just a quick diagnostic cycle to get into our talk about location shoots. It's pretty simple. You could pick anything you want that was shot for Trek that really didn't take place inside one of their designated studio sets. So you can go as big and broad as something like the opening tease of the Vulcan Hello, where you have Sonequa Martin Green and Michelle Yeoh out in the desert in Jordan, or something as small as, and I love this one, as Tom Hardy posing for a picture for his Academy photo that was at a fountain right out on the Paramount lot in front of the sets and the offices there. So it could be something big or small, but anything that's not taking place on one of the regular standing sets built for the series or films. And before we jump into our Prime Directive, just a quick preview to a story that I know you're going to hear tonight later. One of the reasons I have John on the show tonight is that I'm about 99.9% sure that I know what one of his picks is going to be, because he has a great story about a personal connection to a Trek location shoot that I just love, and I've known this story for a while. And it's one of the reasons I picked him to have on the show. And I'll throw out there that if by some chance he doesn't pick it, well, then I'm just going to make him tell it later. So at some point you're going to hear this story. So, all right, let's get into our Prime Directives.
I do not concur with your captain's decision.
She's following our Prime Directive.
Define Prime Directive.
So, John, I'm curious how you approach this topic overall. Any specific angles that you took to try to kind of narrow down your list? There's a lot to choose from.
That's always the hard thing, right? Is to choose among favorites, and I struggled with some because I love the real world location of Yorktown from Star Trek Beyond.
Yep.
And it was tough because there were some that I like that I had to cut out of the list, or places that I felt were significant. They were significant almost historically for Star Trek, like at the American Jewish University, they have the Brandis Barden Institute, and that was used in multiple, especially Descent as the Borg compound. There was also Khitomer in the Undiscovered Country. So it was. And of course, any place that Nicholas Meyer has physically been shooting Star Trek is like, wow, that's great. He was out of the studio. So it was very difficult. And I guess what led me to pick the final 5 was just, I wanted to choose something that was either significant to the show or to the movie series. And that would have some sort of a story behind it, in addition to either a real world story or a Hollywood history story, something that went along with it. That was sort of my 2 big guiding principles. But it was tough because there were so many great ones.
Okay, that's super cool. That's a great way to look at it. And I'm so glad you brought up that it's the Yorktown shoot, because that's not one of my picks. And for some reason, I didn't think of it. I did a work trip to UAE for a trip a couple years ago, and it was right after Beyond came out. So I took an afternoon and I went to that building complex, and it was incredible. It was like it felt like I was on the Yorktown. I sat there for about 4 hours, had lunch, took a bunch of pictures. I might need to post some of those again. It was cool. So. Okay, Alex, how about you, man? How'd you break down your list?
So mine was a little similar and also a little different. So mine was, I had 2 conditions for mine, and I was kind of comparing it to the last time I was on and the rest of the sort of scenes in a series where the location in which the particular scenes take place are pretty standard, right? Like scenes in a turbolift. The turbolift always looks the same. Whereas this one, you have a huge amount of variety to choose from in terms of the different types of locations that they shot on. So the two conditions that I came up with to narrow down what was an incredibly long list were, one, it had to have minimal digital alteration. So I also did not pick Starbase Yorktown because I felt like it had been significantly digitally altered. Yeah. And two, I felt that the scene, there had to be some kind of interaction between the characters and the location, and that it was important that that be the location at which the scene took place.
Okay, that is another cool way to look at it. And that's awesome. That's different from John too. I love the idea of the minimal digital alteration as a criteria. I didn't really think about that one. But as I'm looking at my list, I think that would actually apply where there's not a ton. Maybe on a couple there was a little bit. So my starting point, I looked for, and I had a long list when I was brainstorming this, but I was looking for a kind of an immersive 360-degree set experience that's really what I ended up gravitating towards. So not all my picks were that, but was definitely that direction I was leaning toward, kind of these big outdoor 360 types of sets. But I'll tell you, I did end up with a couple that weren't that as well. So yeah, it was just fun brainstorming this one because there's so many ways to think about it. All right, let's do this third Roboticon. It's time for the order of things.
I am a Jem'Hadar. He is a Vorta. It is the order of things.
Thank you, third Roboticon. And as always, just a quick reminder on how we're going to go through the order of things. First, each of us will reveal our 5-word summary and a hashtag to tease our pick. Then we'll reveal our episode title and the specific scene on location that we are highlighting. Then we'll talk it through a little bit, and at the end, we'll ask everyone for some secondary system selections for the picks that maybe just missed their list. And as always, if we have any duplicates, make sure you listen for the Defiant Torpedoes. Okay, John, let's kick this off. What's your number 5 pick for scenes on location?
Okay, well, my 5-word summary is very obscure, but I'll give people a hint. It's a 70s sitcom reference, but it's hers and hers and his. And it's the hashtag would be when LA is not LA. My 5th pick was from the Voyager episode Future's End.
Yes.
When they've gone back into time and to the present, at that time, present day, 1990s, and they're at the Santa Monica Pier, where they also filmed Three's Company. The opening credits of Three's Company. So I thought that was a nice little connection there. And I love that scene when they kind of first arrive on Earth of the past, and we get to see the characters in their kind of 1990s clothing, and they're interacting with each other and very much interacting with the environment, looking at the people, and kind of a very sort of Star Trek 4 walking around San Francisco in the first few moments of that kind of a scene. And the reason I thought that was an important scene, of course, it's supposed to be LA, right? Even though it's really Santa Monica, you could tell it's the Santa Monica Pier. Even I, who've never been to the Santa Monica Pier, knows what the Santa Monica Pier looks like. But in the episode, it's supposed to be LA because you actually have LA police officers. I should say you have LA police officer characters. The reason that I chose it was because I think it's fair to say that it takes, and I think that's true of many shows, but the 3rd season of Star Trek, whether it's Next Generation or Deep Space Nine, when Sisko gets his goatee at the end of season 3, and there's something about season 3 where the actors have been doing it long enough, the writers have kind of found their way, that the shows tend to bump up. Where they go from being incredibly fantastic because it's Star Trek to really incredibly fantastic. And I think that happened with Voyager in season 3 as well. I love the first 2 seasons, but season 3, the characters really started to relate to each other. They had fun with each other. And that Future's End 2-parter was just a very fun, clever, very Star Trek-y episode. And I felt that the moment when they're all kind of on the pier and they're kind of looking around and beginning their adventure on Earth, that was sort of an important symbol of Voyager coming into its own, as many Star Trek series do within the third season.
Yeah, that is perfect. And I thought about this one. I love when Tuvok says, "We could have just worn our uniforms," and absolutely perfect.
They wouldn't have noticed. Yeah, it was great.
And I love your hashtag. I knew right away it was Three's Company, but I didn't connect that they had shot their opening there as well, almost the exact same spot. So, Alex, what's your take on Future's End? Such an awesome pick.
I love it. This episode was on my list, and I had picked exactly the same scene, and about an hour ago I decided to cut it. So I'm so glad that it made it onto somebody's list. I love that scene, and John elaborated so well on why it's such a great scene. But so the only other thing I'll add is to say that one of the things I really like about Future's End is that when it was first broadcast, it was a contemporary piece, right? They were going to present day. And now it is so unbelievably, tragically, fantastically, wonderfully 1990s. It has become a period piece in the last 20 years, and I love everything about it.
That is so true. It's amazing to look back now. I think it was 20 plus years ago. Incredible. All right. Awesome start. Alex, how about you? What's your number 5 pick?
Okay, so I'm going to start off by reading you the location, then I'll do 5 words and a hashtag, and then I'll tell you the episode. So the location I picked was the Japanese garden at the Tillman Water Reclamation Facility. Mm-hmm. 5-word hashtag, 5-word summary, don't cut off our heads, hashtag Starfleet Command. And the episode I picked was also from Voyager, season 5, episode 4, In the Flesh. And the scene I picked was the opening scene to the episode, basically the teaser. I really wanted to find a way to get Tillman onto my list. It was the Japanese garden there was featured as Starfleet Command and the grounds of Starfleet Command at least 3 times, once in The Next Generation, once in Deep Space Nine, and once again in Voyager. And Voyager's the last time you see it. And this scene is really great because you open on Starfleet Command and you're like, oh, okay, well, we're in this familiar place. We know where we are. But as the scene kind of goes on, you start to get this sense that something's not quite right. And then you encounter Chakotay and he's taking pictures and you're like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Why is Chakotay at Starfleet Command? Because Voyager's in the Delta Quadrant. It's a really cool way of starting off the episode by showing you something very familiar. This location was used in huge episodes, The First Duty and The Next Generation and Homefront and Paradise Lost and Deep Space Nine. Very familiar to anybody who's seen a Starfleet Command episode from the television shows. And yet slowly they start to pull away the familiar and start showing you that there's something strange and alien happening underneath. And I think it's just a really nice way of unsettling the audience and preparing you for an episode that subverts a lot of your expectations.
I love that you picked In the Flesh for this. I'm very confident that Japanese garden at the Tillman Water Reclamation Plant was going to come up on somebody's list at some point, maybe even again. But I would never pick it would be for In the Flesh. That is so cool. John, what's your take on that pick?
Oh, that's great. That's a great pick, Alex. The 2 things I was thinking of when Alex was talking was, I hope you mentioned it was the last time that we've seen it, and as you said that, I said, "Ooh, I hope maybe we'll get to see it again in Picard." You know, wouldn't that be cool?
Oh, me too. Absolutely.
Wouldn't that be cool? So I thought about that. So that was a nice idea. And then when you were talking about a great way to start the episode, I always think of Carl Reiner, who we were watching a making of he had done for the Dick Van Dyke Show, and he calls it a Hey May moment because they would always try to start off a Dick Van Dyke episode with what he would call the Hey May moment. It's you're sitting there watching TV, the husband's sitting there watching TV, and something strange happens. and you call your wife, "Hey May, come here, look at this,"
Right. Yeah.
and that is definitely a "Hey May" moment. That's a great choice because it's so, you're like, why is Chakotay at Starfleet? Like, is this in the past? But wait, it's not in the past because Chakotay is, and so your mind really, it takes a few moments for you to orientate yourself to that opening, and that's a great way for the setting to play a role in immediately grounding you, and you go, I know this place, right? And where the place becomes almost a character itself. So I thought that was a great choice.
Yeah, I love it. So, okay, well, I'm going to move to my number 5 pick. The first two on our list are big, iconic locations. My number 5 pick is a little bit more of a deep cut reference. 5 words and a hashtag. Spruce Goose in my hometown. Hashtag movie making magic. And the episode is Star Trek Into Darkness, which is the second Kelvin timeline film, and my scene is the ship-to-ship jump for Kirk and Khan when they land on the Vengeance in the shuttle bay. And first of all, I love this movie. Everyone knows that. So regardless of how you feel about this movie, I am in love with the ship-to-ship action kind of set piece in the middle of the film, and I love how they filmed it. And so the big setup is that when Kirk and Khan are landing on the Vengeance after this space jump scene, that they filmed it in this huge industrial warehouse where the Spruce Goose was built. And that warehouse is in Playa del Rey. It's about a mile from my house. And that Spruce Goose is obviously the famous huge airplane from Howard Hughes fame. And I love that. So there's JJ talks about filming this scene on the commentary for Into Darkness, and he shows how they did it, and it's incredible. They didn't touch up anything on the walls, which were just like old wooden walls. It's this huge long space. It looks incredible. They did all with lighting and lighting effects, and they laid down one, like, not carpet, but one piece of flooring down the middle that doesn't even go wall to wall, but just kind of frames the area where Kirk and Khan are flying in. And I just love these scenes where Scotty's running all the way from one end to the other, and it's just, there's nothing digital about it. It's just him running the distance and these lights. And when Kirk and Khan land on the ship through the portal, they actually, they have 2 stuntmen on wires that they're dragging along this floor for about 45 miles per hour all the way to the end, and where they get to the end and they roll and come to the end, and the music and the lighting and the effects and everything about this scene I just love. And the fact that it was filmed about a mile from where I'm sitting right now in this big warehouse, the way that they did it, movie making magic, I love it. So that's my pick. John, what's your take on that one?
That's a great choice, because one of the things with J.J. Abrams that he's bringing to Star Wars for sure, and also brought to Star Trek, and I think, not being an expert or anything on it, but I think he also brought this type of filmmaking to the Mission Impossible series too, which is this big trend we're starting to see among a lot of filmmakers these days, which is sort of a return to the real world as much as possible, and not the digital environment. And you certainly get that with like the great, I mean, just really old-fashioned great little tricks JJ used with his Star Trek films, where, how do you get it to appear that Kirk is hanging on to by a tether line and by his fingers to this big mining, device in the sky. You put a mirror behind him, the actor, so the sky reflects up behind him, and you really shoot that for real. And we had gone to Rob Berdow, who's the head of ILM, did a talk about the Solo movie, and one of the things he talked about is the way that they film the cockpit scenes now. And the Falcon, they literally do it like the old, you watch the old like Disney movies, and they're in a car, and you could tell that they're on a set, and behind them is a projector, right? And it's obvious. But now with the high quality HD quality, they're able to have the actors actually looking at star fields And he talked about there's a moment where if you look in Han Solo's eyes as they go to, the actors are really seeing themselves kind of go to hyperspace, and you see it in his eye. You see it in the iris of his eye. And he said they would not have thought to add that to the movie, but that was something in the real world. And I think that what's great about this pick is by filming at a real world location, I think we know when it's CGI, no matter how good it is.
Yeah.
You know, your eye knows it, your mind knows it. And it's why I think old James Bond films are more exciting. I mean, sure, you know that wasn't Sean Connery falling from the plane, but it was a guy falling from the plane.
Right, yeah.
And it was real, you know. And so I think that was a great choice because that shows the movement. I think they're doing this on Discovery, too, where they're trying to do as much real-world, in-camera work as possible.
Yeah, and this is a perfect example of that. The tricks that he uses in this one, just real simple filmmaking tricks with real world lighting and just one piece of flooring down the middle is super cool. And guys on wires, I love it. Alex, any quick take on that one?
My other favorite scene from that location is the scene where Scotty has to run back and forth making fun of the Star Trek trope of there are two things in a room, but they're on either side of the room, so it either creates humor or drama as a result.
Yeah, I mean, I love when he runs all the way to that wall. And he's just like, God, it's very wee. Genius. All right, let's go to round 4. John, what's your number 4 pick?
Okay, my hashtag is... Sherwood is more than a forest, hashtag. And then the 5 words is Zimmerman to the rescue again. And so for that, I chose the movie Star Trek Insurrection, and the location was Lake Sherwood near Thousand Oaks, California, which was originally named Lake Sherwood, believe it or not, for Robin Hood. They filmed the 1922 Douglas Fairbanks version of Robin Hood around that area, and the lake was named after.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
that is so cool.
It was named after that. And for Star Trek, of course, this is the location where they built the Baku village, and I'm a huge Insurrection fan. I love Michael Piller. To me, Michael Piller is, there are a few names to me that are there's so many great contributors to Star Trek, but there are a few that sort of have saved Star Trek from potential, bad fate. And one of them is Michael Piller. And I love Insurrection because it's like an episode. I've never understood that criticism of Star Trek films where people say, well, it's too much like an episode. And that's why I like it, because it's like an episode. So I love the Baku. My wife and I, of course, are fascinated as sociologists with the Amish. We spent our honeymoon with the Amish, so that should tell you 20 years ago. So that should tell you how much we like them. So the Baku are just space Amish, right? So I like that. And I love their village, and I love the design of them. We even own a Baku costume from the film, and so I love the Baku village, and I love that it's made out of style. I mean, to me, it just shows that Lake Sherwood set, which was at the time the largest outdoor set for a Star Trek film. I think it still is the largest one ever designed for a Star Trek film, and I love the Thai and Polynesian influences there. But what I love is that all those buildings are made of styrofoam. Yeah. And then they're painted, and then they made to look like they've been there hundreds of years, and they look like stone. And that's all Herman Zimmerman and the construction crews who never get enough credit. The guys who actually, and the gals who are swinging the hammers and screwing in the nuts and doing the painting and all that, who just really make Star Trek, the world, believable. I mean, when you see like the new Enterprise set on Discovery, you're like, wow. And just to think somebody was like built that with their hands, right? And so Howard Zimmerman, I think, really deserves a lot of credit for the design of that, but also I'm sure most people have heard the story, but while they were filming, of course, bad luck, they get some of the worst rainstorms in history in that location in the spring of 1998, and the rain the next day, when it heats, when the sun comes out and it heats it, it warps all of that styrofoam that those buildings are made out of. So now you have to have the crew come in and really try to figure out how to fix this problem, and Herman Zimmerman and his team come in and make it work. And I just think that's a really great example of the ingenuity and genius of people like the Akutas and Doug Drexler and Herman Zimmerman and all the behind the scenes people who work on Star Trek then and now, and really how much they love it and the genius they bring to it. So for both the behind the scenes moment and I think the very sort of beautiful opening of the film, the great way they set up the difference between our world. I love that Data, all Data is talking about in that opening scene, and all the people in Duckblind, there's no humanity in the way that they speak. It's all, Ensign Giles, go here, and it's all data and numbers and statistics, and Data's talking about malfunctions here and malfunctions there, and you juxtapose that with the Baku, and I thought, what a great commentary about what we're becoming like as people, even before we had social media in the way that we have it in our lives, and how the technology is shaping the way we speak and behave and interact with each other. So it's a great Star Trek and great Star Trek behind the scenes.
Yeah, you hit on all my talking points as you announced this pick. It's the Herman Zimmer masterpiece, full stop. And my main point was going to say the scene was set from the very first shot of the movie. It was just so beautiful the way that was done with the score and the cinematography. Alex, what's your take on Insurrection?
Amazing. And the only thing I'll say is if this were just an episode, it wouldn't have such stunningly gorgeous location shooting.
That's right.
Yeah, it's incredible. Plus when they get up on the mountainside too as well. Okay, let's jump to Alex. What's your number 4 pick?
Okay, my location, Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California. My 5-word summary, call a timeout, #making a substitution. My selection is Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 7, Episode 4, Take Me Out to the Holosuite. And specifically the denouement of the episode in which Sisko comes to his senses and substitutes Ramin, who ultimately makes the bunt that helps them score a run and that sends them into a fit of celebration. The whole episode was leading up to this one scene. I love the whole, and at various points, I think I picked all of the on-location baseball field scenes for this episode as I was watching my way through. I started off with the tryouts, then I went to the training montage, then I went to the beginning of the game, and I finally settled on the scene being the end of the game because it's the most kind of Star Trek message in what is a very sort of small, certainly small stakes episode, given that it's just a baseball game. And it's one of those really nice things about Star Trek where you can tell those stories that, around this episode are to do with profits and wormholes and wars and politics and the fate of billions of people. And then this one episode comes down to a baseball game and learning to let go of your grudges and find fraternity in the people that you spend all of your time with, and have that message be as resonant as one around whether to kill a bunch of people or start a war, end a war. And it's just a really nice episode. It's a really, really nice scene that the build up to is really well executed, and such a nice location that they shot the baseball scenes at.
Okay, I love this pick. I did not think of it. It's fantastic. And the one thing I'll say is this location for this is about maybe 500 yards away from the Spruce Goose building. Because Loyola Marymount overlooks this area in Playa del Rey. It's also right down the street from my house. I love it. It's so cool. And that is an amazing, amazing pick. You can look it up, but do it in the stands because you are out of here. John, what's your take? Take me out to the hollows.
Oh, it's a great choice. I didn't even think of that. I mean, it was really brilliant. I like it. It's like that the Picard rolling the egg across the floor with his nose moment, which is something that really defines DS9. I always remember Ron Moore and Brandon Braga telling the story that when they first wrote the script of Generations, they sort of showed it around to their peers, to Ira Stephen Bear and to others. And one of the original version had like them on the holodeck doing like a space battle or something like that. And they're like, no, you got to start off the movie with like Picard rolling an egg on the floor with his nose. Like that's what they should be doing. And you see that so many times on DS9, right? I mean, it's really Ira Stephen Bear, like, you know, let's put him in a Las Vegas casino. Let's have it be James Bond. And this is one of those kind of moments where DS9, what makes DS9 so unique is that willingness to kind of take the characters out and put them into something like that. So that was a great choice.
Yeah, it's inspired. There's another example of them being able to pull off something like this in the middle of all the different threads and serious storylines they have going. Love that pick. Okay, let's go to my round 4 pick. This is going to be another warehouse pick, but I swear this is my last one. The rest are all beautiful scenics. Okay, so my spoiler alert, my 5 words and hashtag. She'll die if we don't. Hashtag, yes, sir. That is the idea. It is Star Trek Discovery. The episode is The Red Angel, and it's capturing the Red Angel on ESOF 4. And this episode for me is really special. I just think they hit a home run with this, the way they told this story and the production design quality and the work that they put into this scene, where it's the scene where they're going to kill Burnham and they're going to try and capture the Red Angel. And so the location of this is called the Hearn Generating Station, which is a decommissioned electrical generating station in Toronto. And they've used it for a couple of things now in Discovery. They used it in Brother as the crashed set for the Hiawatha where we first meet Jet Reno. But in this episode, and again, it's the lighting and the way that they shot this as a practical set in this huge open space with the lighting and the dust swirling and everything going on. It absolutely floored me watching this. This is another one of those examples of when Alex Kurtzman talks about Discovery trying to make it more cinematic in a way that Trek on TV hasn't been. And good or bad, that's not the point of that. The fact that they did it. I mean, these scenes and these types of production quality on that is so cinematic. It's like you're watching a movie in terms of the production quality. And I just love the way it's got that open air feel, even though it's not really open air and it's kind of exposed and everything's deteriorated around it and falling apart. And the lighting on it was amazing. The director on this was I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, Hanelle Culpepper, but so she's directing the first 2 Picard episodes. So I'm excited to see what she does. John, what's your take on that one, the Red Angel scene?
Oh, it's great. You know, I was thinking when you were talking about the idea of how a location can help define a character, right? Or how a location can help reveal something about a character. And so here you have, you know, what is heroism, right? And so Michael shows heroism in a lot of different ways in season 2, right? There's the self-sacrifice that she's willing to do, I think is the big theme for her that season. And that moment is a really important way of that. I mean, there's a lot, you know, you could be heroic by running in and saving somebody, or you could be heroic by, you know, risking your life to do this or that. But the idea of sort of willingly sacrificing yourself or that sort of thing, that's a very contemplative type of heroism, because you know, in an emergency, you might be reacting viscerally and therefore act heroically, but she's very contemplative about her heroicism in several of the episodes, and this is one of them. And so that scene, that location, and the lighting, as you mentioned, really adds to the sort of contemplativeness and the power of what's going on there. So that's a great choice.
And knowing how much pain she's going to be in while she's doing it. And I like that thought too for the scene with Spock, which was my 5 words and a hashtag. Because obviously the control room stuff in this scene is filmed on a set that they seamlessly integrate it with the location shoot. But I love when they're basically saying, "No, we got to get out there and save her because she's going to die." And Spock's just like, "Yes, sir. That is the idea. That was the plan. She's going to die." And then we'll see if this thing works. Alex, what's your take on the Red Angel scene?
Yeah, to John's point earlier, I mean, this is the kind of thing you could either have built a set for or you could have done digitally. But if you'd done that, it never would have looked as good as it does in the episode.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's a scene where she's sitting in the chair and you can just see the hallway going all the way back. And you know it's not a digital effect. It's like a practical. It's just this long hallway. So I guess I like long hallways now that I look at the first two picks. All right. Let's go to the soup round. John, what's your number 3 pick?
Okay, number 3, my hashtag kind of gives it away, but it's Rio Ruropente.
Oh, yes.
And my 5 words were no stockade, no electronic frontier. I know I had to cut out a couple of words there, but anyway. It's a very brief moment in terms of the scene that I selected, but it's the escape sequence with Mardia, Bones, and Kirk. They're on Ruropente, and the real world location is the northern Alaskan Kink Glacier. And it's also important, I think, from a historical behind the scenes point of view. In that moment, it's the first time Star Trek ever filmed outside of California. Was for Star Trek 6, and now, of course, it's they filmed Discovery in California, and it's not unusual for productions to go outside of California anymore. But that was a really unique, and I think also shows the confidence that the amount of money that it took to do, even though those were, stand-in actors walking along the glacier, but when you put the imagery of them, real human beings really walking across this, what truly looks like an alien environment, and then you add in Cliff Idleman's music on top of that, and the just beautiful photography of the secondary unit there. That just, to me, that opens up Star Trek 6, because, of course, Star Trek 6 had budgetary constraints, as many of the Star Trek productions do. And so, there's a lot of cheating in the film to make things look bigger than they are, or to, they're using the uniforms from previous productions, and they're using darkness so you don't see the entire set. I think a great example of that is the Kirk and Spock moment at the beginning of the film, when they're talking about China, and Kirk is sort of angry at Spock. I mean, there's literally no lighting because they don't have money for the set. And right. but it works. It still makes that moment. It helps the moment by having the limitation, which is one of Nicholas Meyer's guiding principles, is the idea that art thrives on limitations. But there's this moment in Star Trek 6 where there is no budget. Money, haha, what is it? We have millions of it. And they just open it up, and it's this beautiful moment, and it just makes you believe that they are on another world. Even in a way, if people find this sacrilegious, I thought that was a more realistic moment than Hoth was, in terms of making me believe I was looking at a real ice planet.
Yeah. I mean, you said it all. This is why we have John on the show. I didn't realize I probably knew this way in the back of my head, but it's the first time Star Trek was shot outside of California. That's such a cool little nugget. And I thought about this one. It's on my secondary systems for sure, because it is a big, iconic, huge world expanding moment for Star Trek in Star Trek 6. Alex, what's your take on this one? Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have worked if they hadn't done that. You needed it in order to establish the remoteness and the harshness and the kind of serious predicament that Kirk and McCoy found themselves in. And Star Trek being, obviously, many of these movies have not had unlimited budgets, and for them to have made the decision to go and film that as a result, I think just shows the importance of establishing the situation that those two characters found themselves in.
So, John, when you were going to make your pick, I was wondering if you're going to go with this or the Bronson Canyon part of the inside Ruropente, where they shot some of that, right? Because some of that was inside the Bronson Canyon caves, right?
Yeah, in fact, the brilliance of these guys, right? So to film, they're filming when we're in the caves, we're actually outside. at night.
Right.
They're filming in this open area, but it's night to make it look like they're inside of a cabin. I mean, just great. I mean, there's Star Trek 6. There's so much to love about that film.
Yeah, it's a great mix of the location shoot in the snow, and then the Bronson Canyon shoots, and then there was obviously stuff on set as well. So cool. Okay, Alex, what's your super round pick?
Okay, my location, Callaway Vineyard and Winery in Temecula, California. 5-word summary, close to 25 years, hashtag since we were all together on the Enterprise. My pick is Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 7, Episode 25, All Good Things. And specifically, the first scene in which Picard jumps to the possible future in which he is at his vineyard as a much older man and meets up again with Geordi. I really like this scene for a few reasons. I think it kind of satisfyingly establishes what Picard's later life would have looked like. We get some kind of brief hints in that conversation between Picard and Geordi that immediately kind of give you all of the really important information you need to know about the character and what his past 25 years have been. And they do a really good job throughout the episode of that, of showing rather than necessarily telling in many ways. You just get those little hints about, he used to, at some point, he was an ambassador. And I think the idea of him ultimately going back to the vineyard is a really powerful one, kind of tracing all the way back to the season 4 sophomore episode Family, in which we see the vineyard for the first time, that it actually was a different location that they shot at for Family. I just think it's a really great kind of opening scene. And yes, I'll be 100% honest, that part of the reason why I picked this and it made it onto my list and never got off is because of the teaser that we got for Star Trek Picard a couple of weeks ago that also indicates that Picard in his actual timeline at some point ends up back on the vineyard. That was very, very exciting and tied together really nicely to All Good Things, especially since the premiere of the trailer was on the 25th anniversary of the first broadcast of All Good Things. So both a backward-looking and very much a forward-looking pick for the future of Star Trek.
An inspired pick, and remember, everyone, TrekRanks picks are always of the moment. They could change in an hour, let alone a day or a week. So that's a fantastic pick. I am so excited about the Picard series, and as soon as you mentioned the vineyards, I knew where you were going. Epic. I mean, it's so memorable too. It's like that is a defining scene from and moment from TNG, and All Good Things. John, what's your take on All Good Things and Picard Vineyard?
Oh, I want Picard TV show now.
Yeah.
Is it November? Soon. Great choice. I guess what I'd say about it is that that vineyard and Picard being in the vineyard is another, I think, thing that separates Star Trek from some of the other kinds of popular sci-fi franchises, in that it connects us to us, right? So this isn't. I sound like I'm anti-Star Wars, but I'm not. I love Star Wars, but it's not another galaxy. This didn't happen a long time ago. These people are our great grandchildren, and by having things like vineyards and places where we can orient ourselves and go, I've seen those. I've been to a place like that. That helps to ground Star Trek as an extension of our world and our possible future, by using locations that are easily recognizable to us.
Yeah, that sums it up perfectly. So true. Picard series soon. Can't wait. All right. I guess I'm up. So let's close out round 3. It's our first duplicate. I'll just say this quickly. 5 words in a hashtag. Idyllic set, score, and direction. Hashtag the Baku sure know how to live. And it's Star Trek Insurrection, that opening moment of the incredible panning camera over the Baku village. I love it. John said it all, from the Frakes direction and Herman Zimmerman's design and Jerry Goldsmith's score. It's just an iconic moment, shot up at the Lake Lake Sherwood in Ventura County, just north of LA here. So, all right, we can move on from that. Love that moment. Let's go to round 2. John, what's your number 2 pick?
Okay, number 2, my hashtag is Field of Empty Holes. That probably gives it away. And my 5 words are choose Owens Lake or Yosemite. And the reason I chose those 5 words is because that's what I think. Although Star Trek V isn't about the environment as a big issue, but it's really more about religion and spirituality and that sort of thing. But I think I've always loved the first. I mean, I love Star Trek V, and I unapologetically love Star Trek V. I recognize it. I think they needed a couple more millions of dollars to sort of finish certain things, but that's okay. But I love the first, especially 20 minutes of that film. Everything about it, from the music to the cinematography to the direction, the acting, the scene when they're in the 3 of them are around the fire, in the camp around the fire. It's just beautiful and means so much now that 2 of the 3 are no longer with us. And but I love the juxtaposition at the opening of the film. I love when they start off on Nimbus 3. And then from there, we go to space, then we go to Earth, and we go to Yosemite. And I always read that as a warning, like this is what we could do, or we could preserve stuff, and it could look like this. And the fact that the opening moment of Star Trek V, the Nimbus 3 moment, is filmed at Owens Lake. So if people aren't familiar with that, Owens Lake, which is part of the Mojave area, had water, was a lake. It was known as Owens Lake until 1913. Then humans started siphoning water from it to divert to the LA aqueduct system. So in only 13 years, that beautiful lake was emptied, and it became what we see on screen in Star Trek V. And so it's sort of and it became the single largest dust polluter in the United States. And so, there's some augmentation in that scene, I think, very early, kind of like, there's a little more sort of background dust and so on, but they don't have to do a whole lot to make that sequence where Sybok rides up, where there's dust and fog and pollutants in the air. And I love the acting in that scene. I love that moment. I love when he says, "These holes are all I have." I mean, it's a great moment. And and if you read the book, it even means more, because you know what that actually is referring to, the loss of his wife and all that. But I love, then you cut to Yosemite, and Yosemite allowed Star Trek to film there at El Capitan because they like the idea that Yosemite would still be around 300 years from now.
That's great.
And I just love that juxtaposition between the 2 of those scenes. And so I guess I don't know whether it's Yosemite I'm choosing or Owens Lake, a dry lake, but it's that whole moment.
That's incredible. So I hadn't thought of the Nimbus 3 opening scene, but the cinematography in that scene is astounding. It really is effective, with the horse riding up and all I have is my holes, and that's incredible. I love it. Alex, what's your take on Final Frontier, Nimbus 3, and Yosemite?
Climbing El Capitan had been on my list, and I decided to cut it. So again, I'm so glad I get the opportunity to talk about it, because what an amazing opening kind of moment. I mean, in some of the same ways as Insurrection did. You start off with that kind of quiet beat that sort of establishes some of the kind of themes of what the rest of the movie is going to be about, and then just the amazing kind of camaraderie and repartee between the big 3 after you get that mysterious opening. It is a really, really powerful way to have started that movie.
Yeah, it's funny. I would have thought about the Yosemite part of it and the juxtaposition, and I didn't know where they ever shot that before. So that's great, John, that you said that. Owens Lake. That's amazing. Okay, let's keep it rolling. Alex, what's your round 2 pick?
Okay, so my location is the sloop of war, Lady Washington. My 5-word summary: this was the life Will. # what's a stuntsel? It is. We're not going very far. It is Star Trek VII Generations, and the scene aboard the British naval vessel in which Worf has his promotion ceremony.
Incredible.
So I picked this because, first of all, what a incredible way to kick off a Next Generation movie. Obviously, you start off in the 23rd century with the commissioning of the Enterprise B, but then you go to the 24th century, and it's 87 years later, and you start off looking at the ocean, and you pan up to this 17th century, British naval vessel. And then you pan in, and it's the crew, and they're all wearing these faintly ridiculous English naval uniforms. I can say that because that's where I'm from. And you have this whole scene play out, and it really it was one of those moments where it kind of said, okay, this is a movie now, right? This isn't television anymore. We have some more money. We can do more with it. And it was a really nice scene that had a lot of the kind of great character interactions that kind of showed you that, yes, this sort of carries over from the TV show to the movies, and, feel very comfortable with the fact that this is on the big screen now. You had the funny moment of Data pushing Crusher into the water. You had the funny moment about Riker kind of misunderstanding intentionally the order and Worf going into the water. And then it also set up the emotional crux for the movie, which is Picard then gets the news about the death of Robert and Renee. And that sort of is how you end the scene. So a very effective scene that set up the rest of the movie, kind of gave us those nice character moments right off the bat, and was done in a spectacular location.
Yeah, it's incredible. I'll just say really quick, my favorite part of that whole scene is the transition from the Enterprise B in space to the ship on the water. And when you kind of see the big, beautiful cinematography and scope of the ship on the ocean. Incredible. John, what's your take on Generations?
Well, make sure, I'm sure everyone probably knows this, but if maybe a few people don't, watch that scene. And when you see Worf with the water, if you look at his uniform, he's got red on the uniform. And it works because you think maybe he bloodied himself, which is, fun for a Klingon. But it's actually the paint from the side of the boat, because they had repainted it literally that day to make it look even brighter and better. So that's kind of a fun little thing to watch for. But that's a great choice, especially considering Star Trek's origins, right? I think from a U.S. military perspective, they might be. The Starfleet might be a little more like Coast Guard, right? Coast Guard's mission is exploration, rescue, humanitarianism. But certainly Roddenberry's perspective was that it was always sort of the Navy in space, without the military aspect of it in a way, right? So a peaceful Navy in space. And that's why there's always naval jargon and naval ranks and all of that within there, and the Horatio Hornblower mythology that informed Star Trek. So I thought that's a great choice, Alex, because of all of that back history.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And that's holographic paint on his knees, John. Come on.
When he walks off, he doesn't have it. You're right.
It's the perfect kind of thing that would be fixed now digitally in any kind of movie. So, okay, let's close out round 2. We've gone 12 picks, and no one's picked it yet, but I'm going to do it. It's an iconic location in Trek history, 5 words and a hashtag. Amazing open. Everyone forgets about hashtag 1,200 yards, azimuth 87. It's awfully close for these little jewels, Captain. The episode is Arena from TOS Season 1, and it's Vasquez Rocks and the bombing of Cestus 3. So this pick, though, I am not picking the iconic geographic locations of the rocks and everything in the fight scenes in Arena and seen elsewhere throughout Trek forever so famously. I'm picking the incredible fortress set that was at Vasquez Rocks, where the first 15 minutes of this movie takes place, where bombs exploding and smoke, and just, it's, for me, one of the most underrated elements in Trek, because no one really talks about it, because we think about the Gorn v. Kirk, but the cinematic scope of the opening 10 minutes of Arena is unbelievable. This fortress that is a set that was built in the 1950s for the TV shows and movies and westerns. It was torn down in the early 70s, and for me, on TV in the 1960s, that's about immersive 360 degrees as you can get. The tension in that scene with the sound effects of the bombs hitting and exploding and the smoke and Kirk and Spock or I should say Shatner and Nimoy running through that set and doing their own stunts, rolling around and following, not all their own stunts, but there's so many of them when they're just kind of bobbing and weaving and running where they hit the ground and roll over. It's really amazing. And I just love that setup and that scene on that old rickety fortress set that was built with 2x4s and chicken wire and plaster out at Vasquez Rocks. John, what's your take on the fortress set in Arena?
Oh, there's not much more to add. I mean, what you said was so beautiful and so right. I mean, it was a movie for TV. I mean, it really was. Yeah. It was, and it showed the that idea of the enemy you don't know what the enemy looks like, and that really helps to build that. A lot of other shows, they want to show that monster suit as much as they can because they spend a lot of money on it, right? But that episode, you don't see the Gorn for a while.
Yep.
And when you get the Gorn turn around, and now you get him turn around and he blinks, but when you get him, he turns around and you see him for the first time, you have a feeling or an expectation or a supposition already formed, and that they're able to do that. And it was interesting that you said that about that, because in a way, Arena always felt like to me the longest episode, not because it's bad, but because it's so good. I mean, it almost feels like you're watching a 2-hour film.
Yep.
Because they do so much in that 50 minutes.
Yeah.
And including having that whole opening that, is never, as you say, never really mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, you have 10 minutes of that, then you have 10 minutes of a space chase where they're debating kind of the pros and cons of going after them, and Kirk's got to up the warp speed every few minutes because the Gorn keep going faster away, and they're threatening the engines. It is like a 2-hour movie in 1967 on TV in Star Trek. Incredible. Alex, what's your take on Arena?
Amazing build-up, amazing location, amazing episode.
Yeah, and I'm going to say one more thing. It just the design of where the bombs have hit and like the splatter, the paint or whatever it looks like, implosions. It's incredible what they did on that set. The last thing I'll say, it was directed by Joseph Pevney, obviously a historic figure in TOS and Trek history. And I love this note that he shot the whole thing one day under budget. So I think he had 7 or 8 days to shoot, and he finished it in 6 or 7. And boom, he got a $500 bonus for that. So it's pretty amazing. We're talking about it as like a 2-hour movie, and he shot it 1 day less than he needed to. So, okay, let's go to round 1 and some iconic scenes on location in Trek history. John, what's your number 1 pick?
Okay, so my 5 words are Mom and Dad and Monterey. And so the hashtag is there be whales here. And so I got a little story to tell. The scene is walking through the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which in the film is called, in Star Trek 4, is called the Cetacean Institute. And then basically Gillian Taylor giving a lecture on and setting up the sort of science and the stakes of what's happening with whales and their status within the world of the 1980s. And Kirk and Spock literally being fish out of water while they're learning about, fish in water, even though they're not fish, I know, but I wanted to say that. Anyway, so, but they look like fish, but they're not fish. Anyway, the reason I chose that, there's 2 reasons. Let me give you the Star Trek reason, and then I'll give you the personal reason. So the Star Trek reason that I chose that scene is because to me, of course, Leonard Nimoy, we associate so much with Spock and everything, but his contribution as director of 3 and his contribution as director of 4, and of course creating the story of 4, and then coming up with the story with Nicholas Meyer for 6 and being executive producer of 6 and all that, those are very important to the history of Star Trek, those additional roles that he played. And in essence, him being the conscience of Star Trek. And what I love about that scene is that it shows you everything I love about the behind-the-scenes people, and including Leonard Nimoy in his role, in addition to Spock, of these behind-the-scenes roles. And so when you go from the tour to the outside and them looking at the whales, and then them going back downstairs and looking at the whales under the ground, and maybe he's singing to that man, that moment. That's all done in 4 different locations. That's done at the Rio Monterey Bay Aquarium. It's done in front of an ILM blue screen for the scenes where they have the whales behind them and they're underground. It's done at a swimming pool in El Segundo. Yeah. And it's also done at a set at Paramount that's meant to mimic the railing area, the outside railing area at Monterey Bay Aquarium. And I love that who know, you can't tell. You can kind of tell maybe the blue screen now, but then you believe that was all in one real location. And that just shows the brilliance of editing, of the set designers, of the direction, of even the continuity experts are working on the film to make sure that one scene flows with the next, that it's filmed and they go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. You never really realize you're in different locations. So that's sort of my Star Trek reason. Yeah. But my personal reason is that in April of 1986, I was studying for my finals, high school, and I couldn't go with my parents. My mom and dad had decided to go to California and they were just going to go up and down the coast and visit my brother and go to different locations. And they happened to be totally by chance at the Monterey Bay Aquarium on April 29th, 1986, when they were filming that scene with Gillian Taylor. And my dad, both my mom and dad are gone now. And my dad gave up his whole day of vacation to sit there with a big giant 1980s VCR. And the fact that they let him do this, in today's world, it would never happen. And they filmed the sign that says, we're going to be filming Star Trek 4 here. We apologize for any inconvenience. And my dad filmed them filming that scene. Yeah. And when they came home from vacation, they said, we have a surprise for you. And they put it in. And now, of course, this is pre-internet, pre-everything. All I had was Dan Madsen's fan club. And I had no idea what Star Trek 4 was going to be about. And here I am watching Spock and Kirk on Earth with lady talking about whales, just trying to figure out what is going on. And the reason that I love it because I got to see them working on Star Trek and on my TV set at home, but it means so much to me now because my dad gave up that day of vacation and filmed something because my parents liked Star Trek because I liked Star Trek. It was something that they would do with me, because I didn't like baseball and I didn't like, sports or gambling or the things my parents liked, but they liked Star Trek with me. And so I wasn't the kid who was introduced to Star Trek by his parents. I was the kid who introduced his parents to Star Trek, and that my dad did that and means a lot to me that he gave up that day and filmed. And then what I love is he's also narrating because my dad felt the need to narrate the videotape because you couldn't do that with Super 8, right? In the old days, it was Super 8 was silent. So he constantly is, there's Leonard Nimoy, there's William Shatner, hey, and it's on my tape. So if anybody's interested, I'll give Jim the link. You can watch about 10 minutes of that I put up on YouTube. Yeah. And you can watch them filming Star Trek 4. And the camera work is the voice you'll hear is my dad and my mom. And you can watch them filming it. And I'll send that link so everybody could see that. But it means a lot to me now. It meant a lot to me then, and made me really cool with my friends. But I mean, could you imagine them filming, it's Quentin Tarantino Star Trek and like some dudes there with a video camera and they're letting them, home like 2 feet away from him. It's amazing.
It's I love that story. I've seen the footage, and I'll circulate that link on Twitter when I put this show out. But yeah, I mean, it's such a cool story, and I love it because it's so. I mean, quaint's not the right word, but the juxtaposition on today's world with social media and security around films and controlling messaging and things. So I mean, I love it. They literally put up a sign, "Hey, sorry for the inconvenience. We're going to be filming Star Trek 4 all day here." So
inconvenience. If I was there and I had seen that sign, I would inconvenience.
I know.
You mean incredible dream?
Yeah.
Bring me to But I've spent a lot of time researching that scene and who the extras were, and there's even articles written by the extras there. I mean, it's pretty amazing how much information about Star Trek 4 was out there early. But of course, back then, I didn't. Other than my friends, there was no way for me to share that information with anybody.
Right.
Really.
Find it here and there in magazines. And I love your point about the way it was filmed in 4 different areas, the way it was edited together by Leonard Nimoy's crew. Amazing. Alex, what's your take on that one?
That's such a great story. And I also had no idea it was filmed in 4 locations, and I just watched it. And I remember thinking as I was watching it, oh, I wonder if this was all filmed at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And I just from my watch of it, I thought, yeah, probably seems like it. So I am shocked and thrilled to discover that by the movie magic, that is not the case.
For them, I'm sure it was one of those. I'm sure that was a big budget item for them to say, yeah, and we have to fly all these extras to the studio at ILM and shoot the reverse back of Kirk reacting to everything. And because it's literally all the same extras. So there's about 10 or 12 faces that you see in every moment. So, all right.
In fact, one of those extras, if we were interested, is Kimberly Ryawaski, who is in Star Trek 2 tons of times. She's a cadet in Star Trek 2. And anytime they kind of cut to the female cadet on the Enterprise bridge, it's her. And she's also in Star Trek 3 as an extra, and she's also in Star Trek 4. Not only is she with Kirk and Spock on the tour, but she's actually back on the Enterprise at the end of the movie.
Oh,
so I always joke. I always joke. She must be doing some spy work for Kirk or something. She was stuck in the Klingon hold, and she was the spy or something.
I need to look that up. I love those extras. Okay. All right, Alex, what's your number 1 pick?
All right, prep those defiant torpedoes, Jim. But I did pick a different scene. So my location, the corner of Kearny Street, Pacific Avenue, and Columbus Street in downtown San Francisco. My 5-word summary, double dumbass on you, #, remember where we parked. And my pick is also Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that moment.
Yeah,
so
the scene I picked was the first scene where they are in downtown San Francisco after they've left the bird of prey, and it's noisy and it's busy, and they try and cross the street because they don't realize the rules of the road, and Kirk nearly gets hit by a car, and the guy says, "Hey, watch where you're going, dumbass," and Kirk looks at him and goes, "Well, double dumbass on you," and then they just keep walking across the street into traffic. And then they stop in the middle and they have a conversation about needing money, and then they head off to the antique store, and Kirk turns back to the rest of the crew, and they're all just standing there kind of looking extremely out of place, and he says, break up, will you? You guys look like a cadet review. It's just this really fabulous scene that very quickly, it's very similar to the conversation we had right at the start of the episode around Future's End, where you are immediately hit with these people being out of their own time and out of their own comfort zone, not just in who they are, but also for the voyage home and how they look, because they're still wearing their 23rd century clothing. And it just kind of immediately sets up the rest of the movie and shows how the movie was really willing to use San Francisco as, in some ways, a character of its own in The Voyage Home, rather than, just a location that they went to shoot. And that's imbued throughout the whole movie. I mean, there's so many recognizable San Francisco locations, places that I've been, and they use them in a way that you don't necessarily find in a lot of episodes of Star Trek. They go and shoot on location, but it doesn't necessarily matter where it was that they shot. It matters for the voyage home that it was San Francisco.
That's such a great pick. I love that you guys have Voyage Home both as your number one selections. So I recently just rewatched this as well, and I'll just say if you have the Blu-ray of this, or the DVD actually, there's behind the scenes footage on both of these scenes and how they filmed them. The Monterey Aquarium and this corner in San Francisco at the Double Dumbass on You, and they have some of the raw footage, and it's super cool to watch and see how they did it. And that moment with Kirk is genius, the cadet review, the nuclear vessels, that whole bit in that section is amazing. And I'll add one of the things that I love about the Voyage Home, because obviously we all love the Enterprise, but the Voyage Home, there's no Enterprise. And it's hard to kind of think about that. This is the first, so they're telling a story in the Star Trek universe with these characters without the ship. And up until that point, you'd think, wow, well, who's without the ship? Who's going to watch it without the ship? And it's not even a thought when you're watching that movie that there's no Enterprise. It's just about these characters and the adventure they're on. So it's so cool. It's my number one all-time favorite Star Trek film at TrekRanks, and I love it. I love that it's number one on both your guys' lists. John, any quick take on that scene?
I just to add that you guys mentioned the swearing in there. I thought the swearing was actually important. Sometimes they're swearing just to have swearing in all kinds of movies and stuff. But in Star Trek 4, it really serves a purpose, right? It shows the difference between us as 1980s people, then modern people, and then our future selves, and the commentary on language that runs throughout the whole film. And even Spock's usage of it, and that maybe when Spock becomes more willing to kind of use the word, use it, or at least suggest that he's going to use the swear words and so on, that humanizes him, because that isn't a reality, right? In human moments when we are angry or when we are excited, we may swear, right? I mean, that's why those words exist. They exist for for an exclamation of something. And so I always thought that was great. And another sort of brilliant addition by Nicholas Meyer, who wrote all of the sort of San Francisco based sequences. The 1980s sequences are basically his.
Would this be a good time for a colorful metaphor?
Yeah.
I love that they never get the Spock. He keeps throwing damn in all the way to the end of the movie. I mean, there's like little lines where he keeps it. You kind of don't notice it, but there's a couple right at the end where it's like, oh, he's still saying it. It's so funny.
The hell I can't.
Yeah, that's right. The hell I can't. All right, let's close it out. My number one pick, a little bit more of a deep cut. I just love this moment and scene and production of the whole episode. 5 words and a hashtag. Oh, actually, it's 2 episodes. That's right. I cheated because I couldn't make a decision. 5 words and a hashtag. Rocks, shoals, ships, and Torga 4. Hashtag I tore my pants. I guess I'm really in trouble now. So my episodes are Rocks and Shoals and the ship, both from Deep Space Nine. It's really Rocks and Shoals, but it's this rock quarry in Sun Valley, north of Los Angeles in the Soledad County. And I really wanted to have one of these picks where either the ship or Indiscretion, which I didn't pick Indiscretion because I just picked that in our road trips episode. I wanted to have one of these desert locations where they built a ship into the sand, because I just love those two episodes and scenes. So I was looking at that, and then I thought Rocks and Shoals, and I realized those are all filmed in the same place. So I picked this Soledad Canyon, and Rocks and Shoals is amazing. So it's the whole thing. You've got the moment where they're coming up from the crash on the raft, and O'Brien rips his pants. You got the prisoner exchange with Nog and Garrick and Cisco and Bashir, and then the final ambush scene. It's all just incredibly well filmed. It's an amazing set and location, And I love everything about all these episodes in those locations. Plus, we have Third Ramadicon. So he's there in Rocks and Shoals. We love him. Alex, what's your take on the Soledad Canyon you see in Rocks and Shoals and Chips and Indiscretion?
I mean, what a perfect final pick for this episode to be the episode in which Third Ramataclan himself utters those now famous words. Yeah, no, I think it's great. And this was a great episode. These were a great pair of episodes. Both Rocks and Shoals and the ship were really good and really effective at what they were trying to do. Rocks and Shoals especially, you know, the sense of desperation that runs through, that is this kind of simmering undercurrent for the whole episode, not just for the Starfleet personnel whose ship is now sitting on the bottom of the ocean and they have no way to get home and no real way to signal home, but also for the Jem'Hadar and the Vorta, for whom they are also stranded and they are running out of supplies necessary. And there's this real palpable tension that exists and that leads you up to this big finish in which, you know, they nobody wins basically. And it's one of those fabulous episodes in which it really kind of demonstrates some of the horrors of war, not necessarily in as obvious a way as the Siege of AR-558, but certainly no less effective.
Yeah, brilliant. John, any quick take on my number one?
Great choice. I love the use of quarries, you know, and because they're such an interesting location, they use a quarry in Star Trek Beyond, and just you know, they're that otherworldliness again, finding a way to give us something that looks like another planet, but is right, you know, down the road or in, you know, in the same state that we live in. I always like that because it really does call attention to the fact that we, you know, I think we all kind of live our lives maybe within we like go on vacation and then we see the wonders of the world, right? But a lot of us, it's the same environment every day when we go to work or we go to school or whatever. And Star Trek shows you places and you're like, it's almost like that Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade moment where you're just like, that's really a place. Like there really is a place where built into a rock is this, like it exists. And that's one of those moments where it's like, wow, this place in Rocks and Shoals, it's real, and that's a great pick for that.
Yeah, I love what they did with that one. Okay, let's jump into some quick secondary systems picks. Anything that just missed your list, John?
Yeah, there were two I wanted to I mean, there were so many to choose. I wanted to put the USS Ranger on there, standing in for the USS Enterprise, and in Star Trek IV, the nuclear vessel.
Okay, I know this is a broken record. I grew up in San Diego, Coronado Island, and that they shot that right there. The scene with her and Chekhov is literally on a beach. Right where I grew up as well. So,
oh, that's awesome.
I'll shut up now.
You have every right to say that, and an obligation to say it. So I chose two as my kind of standby alternates. One was the Los Angeles Convention Center that's used in Caretaker, and that's the Ocampa planet. And the reason I chose that is because I just thought it makes total sense that a Star Trek episode was filmed at a convention center, right? I mean, that just is right. It's right with the universe. And there actually was a Star Trek convention there in 1977 called SpaceCon 4, where William Shatner and DeForest Kelley and Carlin Ellison and DC Fontana and Grace Lee Whitney, William Campbell, were there. It was called SpaceCon 4, and it was June 18th to 19th of 1977. And I love that, like 20 years later, about they're filming a Star Trek episode at the very same place, but it's standing in for an alien planet. I thought that was great.
That is an inspired pick. I love it.
And then another one I chose, just kind of for the same reason with Vasquez Rocks, the historical value of it, and that's we used to be called the Disney Ranch, but I think they call it the Golden Oak Ranch now. And This Side of Paradise was filmed there, and Silicon Avatar was filmed there, and Emissary was filmed there. So there's been a lot of Star Trek productions filmed at the Disney Ranch. And the moment that I thought was really great about that, great with that sequence, is the moment with Jake and Ben in the very opening moments of Emissary, where Jake's fishing. And I thought like that moment sets up the entire 7-year arc of those two characters, and what I think is the single best thing about Deep Space Nine, which is the relationship between a father and a son, which you do not, and additional to that, a brown father and a son. But that's another element that adds to the reason why it's important. But it's about fathers and sons, and there's so little out there in popular culture about fathers and sons, and I love that relationship between the two of them. The Visitor is my all-time favorite Star Trek episode, and that sequence where they're fishing, that's a real location, and but yet it's not, right? It's a holodeck, but it is a real location. I think it speaks to what Star Trek's all about and what Deep Space Nine's all about.
I love it that Omicron SETI 3 got a shout out, because I thought that might be the Disney Ranch might be on one of your picks, so it's a great secondary systems. All right, Alex, any secondary systems on your list?
Yes, I have 4 that didn't quite make it into my final list. So 1, New York Street at Paramount Studios, which appeared in many episodes, but the one I picked because it met my prime directive of interacting with the location was The Big Goodbye from The Next Generation, in which the first time they walk onto the holodeck and they're amazed by the detail and all of that. So I wanted to do a shout out to that one. Second, Universal Studios is Western Town, and the episode I picked was North Star from Star Trek Enterprise. That was another tough cut for me. Another one where the location really makes that episode. If you hadn't had that kind of authentic Western feeling, it probably would not have worked quite as well. Third, Mount Whitney,
The Ascent.
which from The Ascent. But I figured someone probably would have picked that on top 5 road trips, so I decided not to put it into my 5 list for this one. And I had an alternate for Star Trek Generations. I ultimately went with the Lady Washington, but my initial choice was the Valley of Fire State Park for the episode's final confrontation on Viridian 3 between Soren, Kirk, and Picard.
Yeah, those are great. And I had The Ascent and Mount Whitney on my long list too, as well as Basics. They shot that just outside Sequoia National Park, those incredible scenes. It's called Alabama Hills, where Chakotay and the natives are at the end of Basics Part 2. I also had Shakar on my list because I love that Bronson Canyon set and the way they shot that at the end of the episode Shakar. My toughest cut, which you mentioned before, the Tillman Water Reclamation Plant, was the First Duty, and this amazing scene between Boothby and Picard that was just shot. It was like, it's such a great shot underneath a tree by a bridge in that Japanese garden, and it's beautifully written and very dramatic without being over the top. It's a great moment. Plus, I love Ray Walston. And it hasn't been mentioned yet, a special shout out to the Budweiser factory for the Kelvin Timeline Enterprise engineering set, which is quite infamous, to say the least, in terms of
infamous indeed
location shoots. Okay, I knew this was going to be a great conversation with a bunch of deep cut choices, but now it's time to move on to our regeneration cycle and wind this episode down.
Computer, activate regeneration cycle. Alcoves beta and gamma.
Okay, John, summarize your top 5.
Okay, for number 5, we've got the Santa Monica Pier from the episode Future's End. From the number 4 pick is Lake Sherwood near Thousand Oaks in California, which is the Baku Village from Star Trek Insurrection. The third choice is the Ruapente stand-in from northern Alaska, the Kink Glacier. Number 2 is from Star Trek V, and it is Owens Lake, also known as Owens Dry Lake, and Yosemite, and the juxtaposition of those two. And the final choice is the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which stood in for the Cetacean Institute in Star Trek The Voyage Home.
Incredible list. So you had 3 TOS picks, 1 from TNG and 1 from Voyager, and you had 4 movies represented on your list, which is cool. Alex, break down your list.
My number 5 pick was the Japanese Garden at Tillman for Star Trek Voyager Season 5, Episode 4, In the Flesh. My 4th pick was Loyola Marymount University from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 7, Episode 4, Take Me Out to the Holosuite. My number 3 pick was the Callaway Vineyard and Winery in Temecula, California. That was Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 7, Episode 25, All Good Things. My number 2 pick was the Good Ship Lady Washington from Star Trek Generations. And my number 1 pick was the corner of Kearney Street, Pacific Avenue, and Columbus Street in downtown San Francisco from Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home.
Incredible. So you had 1 each from Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and TOS, and 2 from TNG, and you had 2 films out of your 5 picks. And my top 5 picks, my number 5 was from Star Trek Into Darkness, the Spruce Goose location shoot for the ship-to-ship jump for Kirk and Khan. Number 4 was the capturing of the Red Angel in the Red Angel from the Discovery at the Hearn Generating Station in Toronto. Number 3, from Insurrection, the Baku Village at Lake Sherwood in Ventura County. And number 2 was the Vasquez Rocks Fortress set from the episode Arena in the original series. And number 1, the Soledad Canyon Rock Quarry in California for Rocks and Shoals from Deep Space Nine. So I spread mine around pretty good. I had 1 each from the Kelvin Timeline, Discovery, TNG, TOS, and Deep Space Nine. And I also had 2 films on my list. So our breakdown, I'm going to start with that. This is easily a record for TrekRanks. We have 8 movies picked, which is actually pretty obvious when you think about it. That was going to happen for an episode about scenes on location, since the movie budgets allow for that. So that's pretty cool. 8 movies were selected. So our breakdown, Enterprise was the only incarnation of Trek that was not referenced. And we had 1 from Discovery, 1 from the Kelvin Timeline, 2 picks from Voyager, 3 from Deep Space Nine, and 4 each from TOS and TNG. We had 2 duplicates, and there were 2 indoor locations, which were on my list, and the rest were all outdoor. So cool breakdown of all these amazing picks. I love it. Way too much fun. But as we do every week, we've once again entered a temporal causality loop. So before we can depart, it's time to hear from you.
The Enterprise has been caught up in a temporal causality loop, and I suspect that something similar may have happened to you.
This week, we're flashing back to episode 55 and our top 5 Discovery Season 2 moments. And man, we got a lot of feedback on that. People love Season 2 of Discovery. There's so much to love from it. So the first list I want to relay is from our friend Brittany, who is at Miss B Fuhr on Twitter. And she was recently on our Rainy Day Marathon show, and her 5 picks and 5-word summaries were fantastic, so I have to relay the whole thing. Her production design element, 5 words and a hashtag. We got the new uniforms, hashtag in living color. She had the episode brother for the new uniforms. Her performer, I'm from the Terran Empire, hashtag big dick energy. She had Michelle Yao from Saints of Imperfection. Number 3, her Dabo wildcard pick, go back to your snake pit, hashtag Burnham and Georgiou's relationship in Lights and Shadow. Her actor was 5 words and a hashtag, to serve the greater good, hashtag anticipation and honors Anson Mount as Christopher Pike in Through the Valley of Shadows. And her number 1 pick for episode, hashtag, or 5 words and a hashtag, it's a good day to die, hashtag strong female leads, such sweet sorrow. I love that list. It really defines how great season 2 was. One more quick list from Captain Pikachu on Twitter at Beta Artemis, and his production design pick was handrails on the bridge. I just love that pick. That's pretty much why I picked this list. So great. His performer was Sonequa Martin Green, and he highlights that, or he or she highlights that death scene episode in The Red Angel. His wild card double round pick is the hilarious Universal Translator breaking down In an Oval for Charon, which was one of my favorite episodes. And her actor was Anson Mount as Pike, and his number one episode was If Memory Serves. So another great list. As always, thanks everyone for coming up with all these amazing responses to our TrekRanks topics, which have allowed us to, again, escape our temporal causality loop. So please keep putting your list together and tweeting them to me at TrekRanks so we can share them with everyone on Twitter. But we also want to hear from you, so please put together your own list of top 5 scenes on location and give us a call and tell us your list. You can call us at the Tricorder Transmissions at 609-512-5527. That's 609-512-LLAP. Hopefully we'll hear from you so you can be featured on the next episode of TrekRanks. And on the next episode of TrekRanks, we are doing a fun TrekRanks topic. It's our top 5 hangout spots. It's that simple. Where do you want to hang out in Star Trek? So John and Alex, anything jumping out at you that you might put on your list of top 5 hangout spots? Alex?
Top 5 hangout spot. I think I would have to go for the bar from Bozeman, Montana in Star Trek First Contact.
Yes, the outdoor bar where Zephram Cochrane is hanging out. That is
pretty groovy.
That's a great pick for a spot to hang out. How about you, John? Anything on your top jumping into your head?
Well, I would say Tom Paris's any holodeck program designed by Tom Paris would probably be a pretty fun hangout place, whether it's the French bistro that he creates with the pool table, or the movie theater, or
chaotic.
Yeah. I mean, just so many different fun places. He would seem to be a great guy to kind of. He wouldn't bore you. That's for sure.
I love it. So John will be hanging out at Sandrine's. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, so before we wrap it up, a huge thanks to Trek historian and all-around good dude, John Tenuto, and Alexander Perry, the host of Weekly Trek here on the Tricorder Transmissions. Any final Trek thoughts before you guys sign off?
I want to thank everybody for listening, and thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts. It was always fun, and I learned a lot. Now I want to watch a bunch of new stuff, rewatch a bunch of stuff that you guys mentioned, and watch for the new things you talked about. And I hope that everyone's enjoying what a great time it is to be a Star Trek fan. Picard, and so many new shows coming out, and I'm hoping some movies soon too. So I hope we get a bit of everything. Let's turn the Marvel universe around and make it the Star Trek universe.
That is the truth. Alex, how about you?
Just that I paused the voyage home in order to record this podcast, and after having had such a great discussion about it, I am excited to get back and finish off the movie.
Yeah, every time I finish recording TrekRanks, the first thing I do is power up a few episodes. So, all right, fantastic conversation. Really appreciate your guys' expertise and being on for this fun topic. So thanks again, everyone, for engaging with us here on episode 60 of the TrekRanks podcast. As always, I want to close by saying I'm looking forward to standing with you again here in this place where I belong.
No dog has gone before.
I almost forgot what fresh air smells like.
The atmosphere contains trace elements of nitrogen dioxide, chloromethane.
Put that thing away. Take a minute to enjoy yourself. This guy ever get this blue on Vulcan?
Occasionally.
We're walking on an alien world, light years from Earth or Vulcan. Doesn't that impress you?
I've been to 36 Menshar-class planets. This experience is only marginally different.
Hi there, thanks again for listening. If you're cruising the galaxy looking for even more Trek talk, why not visit our good friends Bill and Dan over at TrekGeeks.com? They've got a great podcast that covers a wide range of Star Trek topics, so you're sure to find something you'll love. And if you're in the mood for some awesome tunes, then you really need to head over to 5yearmission.net. The guys are writing a song for every episode of the original series, and each one is absolutely brilliant. So that's TrekGeeks.com and 5yearmission.net. Check them out today.
That ball is at least a half a meter out. How could you call it a strike? Reverse the call. Reverse the call.
That was low and outside.
The ball was clearly outside.
Oh, what the hell were you looking at? You can't tell me that ball was over the plate. What were you doing? Regenerating?
Caught the outside corner.
Outside corner?
Right foot. That was a ball and you know it. We should have 2 men on. 2 men on. 2 men on.
Gentlemen, you are trying my patience.
What trying your patience? No, wait. You stole the run from us. You stole it just as if you reached up and tore off the scoreboard. You stole it from us.
You're out of here!
What?
No player shall at any time make contact with the umpire in any manner. The prescribed penalty for the violation is immediate ejection from the game. Rule number 4.06, subsection A, paragraph 4. Look it up, but do it in the stands. You're gone!